Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. Let's be going over 3 players at each position that I think are set up for a lot of success, particularly early on in the season. These are guys that I think you can really draft with a high degree of confidence that they're going to give you a lot of production in that first month or so over the course of the season. And let's face it, the first month of the season really does matter quite a bit. If you start your season in fantasy 4-0, you're really in a great position going forward in terms of trades. You can really start thinking towards the playoffs a little bit more rather than finding yourself in a bit of a dogfight to sort of find your way into the playoffs. You can start thinking about getting that first round bye. It's really helpful to have that hot start to the season. It's obviously not everything, but we know how critical that hot start is, and also we just know that it's, beyond that, it's going to be sort of the impression that stays in our brains the entire rest of the year about these players. So if you have guys that start out really hot, it's pretty easy to capitalize on that and get a lot of trade value for them over the course of the season as well, just because people aren't going to be able to shake the feeling that those emotions they had towards the players that started out really well. So I think all these players are poised for really hot starts to the season. After this video, I'll be going over a bunch of players, same thing, 3 players at each position that I expect to start slowly. Then we can sort of, see how you guys feel about these guys. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there's anything you disagree with, any players I maybe missed out on, or any things that maybe I missed as well. So yeah, with that being said, let's just get into it. So the first quarterback set up for a lot of success, particularly early on in the season, is going to be Jared Goff, who was already one of my favorite streaming positions at the position of personal favorite of mine, certainly a guy that if I completely punt on the quarterback position that I feel pretty good about going into the season, even if I do end up being like the last team in my league to draft a quarterback. And part of that is because of this opening schedule here. He opens the season with games against the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks. Those are 4 defenses that were all absolutely atrocious over the course of the last season, especially against the pass. And on top of that, all those offenses are not bad at all. They're going to be more than capable of putting up enough points to make this game a competitive game. And I think Jared Goff could easily be a top 5 quarterback over the first month of the season. I'm by no means expecting him to continue that level of a hot stretch, but I think he's the perfect quarterback option for those of you who want to pair him with someone like Jaden Daniels. You can play Jared Goff at the start of the season, see what you have in Jaden Daniels. Gives you sort of that flexibility to sort of wait a month and see how you really feel about that riskier pick you made. I think Jared Goff's still going to be a rock star for you guys for the first month. The second quarterback that I think is set up for a lot of success over the first month of the season is going to be Kyler Murray. He's got the second easiest strength of schedule for the first month of the season. When I say second easiest, or when I say strength of schedule, I'm referring to last season's points per game allowed to the quarterback position. I'll reference strength of schedule throughout the rest of this video as well. It's a good tool to use when we're just sort of looking to see in general how good these matchups are going to be early on in the season. Of course, defenses can change year to year, but overall it's a pretty good trend to look at. This year, Kyler Murray is going to open the season with matchups against Buffalo, the Rams, Detroit, and then the Washington Commanders. Buffalo is really the only matchup on paper that scares you, but they've lost a lot of pieces on defense this last offseason. They are certainly a team that's going to put up a lot of points, so you could easily see Kyler Murray finding himself in a shootout in all 4 of these games, to be honest. And overall, I think Kyler Murray is my favorite quarterback to draft this season. I think he's going to offer a ton of value on the ground. He's perfectly healthy. Reports at a training camp are great that he looks like he's leaps and bounds ahead of where he was when he returned to the season last year, and he was pretty good for fantasy when he came back last season. So I think Kyler's in line for a really hot start. He's going to carry that through the entire season. So super excited to see what Kyler can do this year. And the last quarterback I'll mention here is going to be Matthew Stafford. And of course, I don't think Matthew Stafford is going to be a reliable weekly option. He's not a guy that I'm expecting to be a top 10 quarterback over the entire course of the year, but he does have a really nice setup in terms of how things are going to start for him this season. He opens the year with matchups against Detroit, Arizona, San Francisco, and Chicago. San Francisco and Chicago, those are a little bit scarier, but they weren't particularly great over the entire season. I know San Francisco is viewed as a really great defense, but you can actually score on them a decent amount. But at a minimum here, I think you could easily pick up Matthew Stafford with your last pick in the draft and start him for the first couple weeks of the year. Detroit and Arizona certainly shape up to be potential shootouts here. I think Stafford's still a great player. He's obviously got elite weapons around him, and he's being drafted behind guys like Kirk Cousins, right around Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a really great value as a guy that you can get at the end of your draft, and if you need to, you can start him for the first couple weeks, then just sort of evaluate how things go beyond that. And of course, there is upside for him. We've seen him be a top 5 quarterback before. This is an offense that could easily just be really awesome throughout the entire course of the season. And if he has a healthy Puka and a healthy Cup over the whole course of the year, he could easily find his way into being a top 10 option for the entire year if things just break right there. The first running back on this list that I think is poised for a really strong start to the year is actually going to be Naji Harris. The Steelers open up the season with the easiest strength of schedule for the running back position over the first month of the year. And on top of that, we can couple that with a Jaylen Warren injury that even if he returns to the lineup as early as in week one, I think it's fair to assume that we're going to see a slightly higher workload for Naji in those early weeks where they sort of work to just make sure that Jaylen Warren doesn't re-aggravate that injury. On top of that, all four of the games the Steelers open the season with are entirely winnable. They play games against Atlanta, Denver, the Chargers, and the Colts. Those Chargers and Colts games are at home. Atlanta and Denver are on the road. All four of those games are very winnable. They'll probably lose one or two of those games, but we know Najee's the kind of running back, the kind of running back that gets a lot of touches, is a high touchdown kind of guy. He's a guy that's going to perform a lot better in games where the Steelers win, and knowing that all four of those games are entirely winnable makes me a lot more confident and feel like I can just pick up Najee as my RB2 this year and just start him really confidently for the first month of the year. I think Najee's going to be a really solid pick over the entire course of the season as well, but knowing that I can feel really confident in him just to start the year, I think that's a really nice thing to have in your back pocket when you're drafting a guy like him. James Cook also makes this list, comes in with really just the primary reason where he's being referenced here is because he opens week one with a matchup against the worst run defense in the entire NFL last season, that being the Arizona Cardinals. They did not really do anything to address it again this season. There's a clear path towards James Cook just absolutely putting up the RB1 overall finish in the first week of the year. And beyond that, his only competition for touches really is Ray Davis, rookie running back out of TCU, I believe. And it's fair to assume that the rookie is going to start the season with a smaller role than he's going to have over the course of the season. That means that you might see James Cook with the closest thing to a true workhorse role that he'll ever have in week one of the year. On top of that, weeks 2 and 3, not scary matchups either. You get games against Miami and Jacksonville. Those are entirely beatable defenses on the ground as well. And I think it's fair to say that James Cook could easily be a top 10 running back for each of the first 3 weeks. So he's a guy I'm super stoked about in general for the course of the season. But I think that if you want to get James Cook, like getting him in a trade is going to be super tough over the course of the season, especially if he does blow up week one. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he puts up 150 total yards and a touchdown, catches some passes in week one, and then that's going to be the lasting impression people have on him the entire year. We'll have waited all off season long to see football, and we'll see James Cook come out and dominate in week one. And if that happens, it's going to be really hard to trade for him over the course of the season. His trade value is going to be super high, and I think that the best time to get him, if you do want him like I do, is going to be in your drafts, so that you don't have to pay an elevated price after he just goes out and dominates week one here. And the last set of running backs I'll talk about here is going to be the Bengals backfield in general. Didn't want to name a specific one between Chase Brown or Zach Moss, but the opening schedule is absolutely fantastic. They get matchups against New England, Kansas City, Washington, and Carolina. Those matchups against Washington and Carolina are especially juicy here. The Bengals are going to go 3-1, potentially 4-0 in this stretch. I'm assuming they'll lose to the Chiefs in that one, but one of these two running backs is going to be really good for fantasy here, especially in wins where they're going to put up a lot of points. They're going to lean on their running game when they get a huge lead here, and I think that between Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I think one of those guys probably flirts for the top 15 finish this year. They are both being drafted significantly below that, so I personally am making an effort to leave effectively every single draft I'm in this season with one of those two running backs. I am perfectly fine with both of their ADPs. I think they both have a ton of upside, and it's just a matter of trying to guess right. And don't be scared about potentially guessing wrong here. If you ended up in a situation where you were worried about that last year, like with the Dolphins, you ended up not drafting any of Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, or Jeff Wilson. Obviously, only 2 of those 3 ended up being valuable, but if you were scared of that backfield just because of the ambiguity, you missed out on a big potential upside for your roster that year. Moving on to wide receiver here, the first name on this list that I absolutely had to highlight was going to be Mike Evans. And just wow, when we look at this opening season schedule here, he gets to start the season with 3 of 4 games this year against bottom 3 pass defenses from last season. So 3 of his 4 matchups are against 3 of the worst teams in terms of defending wide receivers last season. He gets to open the year with games against Washington, Detroit, Denver, and Philadelphia. None of those defenses scare you at all. This could easily be the wide receiver 1 over the course of the first month of the season. We know Mike Evans has that kind of upside. He's a guy that I probably have been a little bit underexposed to, someone that I was a little scared of his draft price in the late second round, but I think it's perfectly adequate. I'm more than happy to draft him there. He's going to be a rock star for you for the first month of the season, even if this Buccaneers offense scales itself back a little bit over the course of the entire year. If you want to draft Mike Evans, get an awesome first month, then look to shop him around. I think that's a decent approach here. Chris Godwin as well should eat against these sets of defenses here. Just such an easy stretch for these wide receivers here. I kind of want to have a little bit more exposure to the Bucs this season just because I think they're going to be guys that could potentially carry us for a month into the year. Next, we've got Packers wide receivers. Again, sort of a similar situation to the Bengals back Nashville, where I didn't want to name a specific wide receiver here because I think they could all have a really good stretch of games. The first 5 weeks are all really great matchups here for the Packers. You get games against Philadelphia, Indianapolis, Tennessee, Minnesota, and the Rams. All 5 of those games are against bad defenses and could easily open up a lot of opportunity for this Packers offense to put up a ton of points. And it's an offense that in general that I think we're all expecting to take a huge step forward. I think a lot of people are really expecting Jordan Love to take that step forward and really elevate this entire offense. And it just makes me feel like if I leave a draft without one of the 4 primary Packer wide receivers, those being Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks, I feel like I made a mistake. I want to make sure that I'm leaving every single draft in with at least one of those guys. They all have their pros and cons, and any one of them could end up being a really great value for us this year. But I think that you should absolutely be targeting some of those guys. I think Christian Watson has a potential path towards being a top 10 wide receiver this year. Jaden Reed could easily just be a rock solid top 15 kind of guy for us. Romeo Doubs might just be a weekly wide receiver 3. Dontavian Wicks is a ton of upside. All of these guys are really great draft picks where they're being drafted right now, and I just want to make sure that I leave every single draft with at least one of them right now. And the last wide receiver we'll talk about here is going to be Terry McLaurin. And I know it's a little tough to bet on a wide receiver opening the season with a rookie quarterback, but I think lines are lined up really great here for Terry McLaurin. John Dotson was traded today, meaning that there is effectively no competition for targets in this wide receiver room. I guess I had to highlight Zach Ertz, just so you guys don't know, in case you don't know, Zach Ertz is there. Probably going to be extremely involved with Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator there. Zach Ertz could be a really nice start throw late in drafts if you're in like a super deep league and just need someone to stream early on as well. But the fact of the matter is, Terry McLaurin is going to have no competition for targets. Jaden Daniels is potentially the best quarterback he's ever had. I don't think there's any reason to really be upset about the quarterback play here because Terry McLaurin has never had good quarterback play. And the first 4 matchups of the year are against pretty mediocre to bad defenses. You get matchups against Tampa Bay, the Giants, the Bengals, and the Cardinals. All really great setups there. I think Terry McLaurin could certainly open up the season as like a solid top 15 kind of guy. And he's being drafted in the early 30s right now. He is one of the more talented wide receivers in the NFL. I think we're forgetting that just because of name fatigue. He hasn't really lived up to the potential or to his talent just yet, and he probably still won't. I don't think he's going to be a top 15 guy over the course of the year, but if you told me he's a top 15 guy for the first month, I would certainly believe that's possible this year. Next up with the tight end position here, not a huge surprise, but I think Sam Laporta is poised for a really awesome start to the year for all the same reasons as Jared Goff as well. He's in line just for a really great start of the season in terms of his opening matchups. He gets matchups against the Rams, Tampa Bay, Arizona, and Seattle to start the season. It's the easiest strength schedule for the tight end position over the first 4 weeks of the year. He's already being drafted as the tight end 1. He will probably be the tight end 1 for the first month of the season, and I think he's definitely going to be a rock star for your roster for that first month, and will make you feel really glad you drafted him, even if over the course of the year he doesn't necessarily pay off at his ADP. Second tight end on this list is going to be Pat Freiermuth, and I think he's just set up really nicely to emerge as a potential reliable option this season. He starts the year with Atlanta, Denver, the Chargers, and Indianapolis, which gives him the 3rd easiest strength of schedule for tight ends to start the season. And on top of that, the tight end position in this Arthur Smith offense was actually extremely fantasy relevant for Arthur Smith last year. It just happened to get spread out between both Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, so neither one of them ended up being a real difference maker for fantasy, but there was a lot of tight end production in that offense, and I think Pat Freiermuth is really the clear pass catcher in this tight end room. I know Darnell Washington's going to play a lot of snaps this year, but he doesn't really profile as a pass catcher the same way that Jonnu did in comparison to Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth is going to be the number 2 target in an offense that really desperately needs him, so I think he'll be a reliable weekly option. If the Steelers offense can surprise at all as well, I think he could certainly put up some spike touchdown weeks and be a really good player this year. And the last tight end I want to highlight here, and just diving a little bit deeper, but I wanted to highlight Noah Fant, just because I think there is a possibility here for Noah Fant to potentially be a late career bloomer, sort of like what we saw with Evan Ingram when he got traded or signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars here. He's in a new offense. You've got new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb coming over from the Washington Huskies here. This is going to be an offense that's going to be potentially a lot more pass heavy. They're going to utilize only one tight end quite a bit. He also lost all of his competition between last year and this year. They lost Colby Parkins and Will Dissly to free agency. And 3 of his first 4 games this season are against bottom 7 defenses at tight end position from last season. I think if you completely miss on the tight end position, if you have to just take a late round flyer, he opens week 1 against Denver, who was the worst matchup or the worst defense against tight ends last season. I think he's going to be a really popular streamer, a really popular DFS play in week 1. And if he actually hits there, he could easily be a hot waiver ad. And on top of that, he's got the draft pedigree. We've seen some production from him before. If you told me Noah Fant ends up being a top 10 tight end this season, I think that's in his range of outcomes. And I think that if he ends up putting out a monster first month, even a monster first week, you're not going to be able to pick him up off waivers for very cheap. So if you want to take him with the last pick, if you miss the tight end spot, I think he could easily be a really nice guy for you guys this year. So that'll do it for the players that I think are going to start the season really hot this season. Up next, I'll be going over the same thing, but players that I think will be starting really slow this season. So 3 players at each position, guys that I don't think I expect to have a particularly hot start, and then maybe guys that I'd be looking to trade for after their slow starts to the season. So stay tuned for that one. That one will probably come out tomorrow for you guys. There will continue to be 4 videos a week throughout the entire course of the season, if not more. So if you guys aren't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future content. It's going to be all free, and I'll be here all year long to help you guys win your leagues. On top of that, if you made it this far into the video, please do give the video a thumbs up. Helps with the algorithm and all that. And then one more announcement as well. I think we have 1 spot left in the subscriber league. If you are interested, drop your email in the comments or shoot me an email at zsteel99@gmail.com. That way I can get you an invite. We can get that draft scheduled, and I'll be live streaming that, providing updates at the course of the season as well. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys are excited about that as well. So yeah, appreciate you guys, and got a lot more football coming. Just 2 weeks away from the regular season, and we're getting really close. So yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.